In the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the merciful. Dear student, Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to our course Applied Linguistics. Our today's topic is, this is the first topic of your course outline, Introduction to Language Learning Theories. As there are different theories and approaches related to language learning or language acquisition. For example, you have heard about behaviorism theory, or there are some other theories also, mentalism or humanism, or there are some more approaches, cognitive theory or cognitive approach, and socioculture theory devised by Vygotsky. So these are the different theories and different approaches regarding language learning. In our today's lecture, two main theories that we will discuss in our today's lecture: behaviorism theory and mentalism theory. Behaviorism theory is based on practicality or stimulus response based, but we can say change. According to the behaviorist, change occurs as a result of stimulus response based. There is a stimulus mean external motives. There is something, what we can say, desire. If there is a desire of food, if there is a desire of good studies, if there is a desire of good marks, good grades, then the change will be according to the demand. Change will be occurred by repetition, by doing that practice again and again. So change in the behavior occur as a result of behavioral series of actions, or they totally ignore behaviorism or behaviorists. What we can say, they totally ignore the inner feelings or emotions and desires of human mind or human being. Just focus on the behavior, just focus on the change in behavior, or change by, what we can say, by, if I'm not using this word wrongly, by hook and crook. By hook and crook there must be change. Or in our schools, in our educational institutions, at school level especially, or even at college level, we can see this overwhelming situation of this behaviorism theory. Our teacher, our authority, and most of the time they ignore the feelings and what we can say, needs and demands of the students. So they want to just change in the minds of the students by hook and crook, and they totally ignore the human feelings, human desire or demands. Next, there is a mentalism theory, or what we can say, mentalist approach. It's based on the mentalist. We will discuss in greater detail. Let's move on. Behaviorism theory. You have heard about the name of B.F. Skinner or Evan Pavlov. They both have done experimentation on animals, and B.F. Skinner's performed experiment on the rat. So there is a, what we can say, he proposed two types of behavior: conditional behavior or operant behavior, or operant actions or voluntary actions. What is conditioned behavior? Behavior in which training is repeated but with some conditions. If a child will perform excellent in studies, he will be awarded with gifts or prizes. Or if a human being will perform, or a jobian, the employee will perform good, he will be given incentives. Or in operant conditioning or involuntary conditioning of behavior, it's one's own free will. There is no condition imposed by the external authorities. There is no enforcement, but the child or an employee or any other human being perform the actions with his or her free will without any enforcement. The person or the learner demonstrates the new behavior first as the response to a system of reward or punishment. And finally, as an automatic response. Maybe sometimes there is a threat of punishment, but there is no condition. There is no condition without conditioning, and he knows the system. He knows that if he or she will perform well in all their actions, in studies, in jobs, and some other things, he or she will perform well, he will be given reward. Or if he will ignore his or her duties, responsibilities, he will not be given reward, rather he will be penalized. B.F. Skinner's, the duration of B.F. Skinner, you can see 1904 to 1990. B.F. Skinner and his followers, they performed an experiment on a rat. They enclosed, or they, what we can say, they put a rat in a box, and there was a bar in that box, or maybe iron bar or steel bar. There was a bar, and the rat first time presses the bar, and it was rewarded with the pallet of food. So nothing forces it to push the bar. It was just accidentally, it was undeliberately or unconsciously press the bar, and after pressing the bar, it was given a food. So it means when the rat finds out the food will arrive, it will press the bar again. So sight of food will stimulate the rat to press the bar so that it comes inside the box. So task was made difficult. There was food, the tray of food was kept outside the cage, outside the box, and it presses the bar, and it was very astonished to see that the food is not coming inside the box. Why? Then it learned, or it came to know that now just pressing the bar is not sufficient. Now after pressing the bar, when there will be a flashing of light, then the food will be given. So at first the rat was puzzled, but eventually learned the trick, and it was very tricky exercise. So after seeing the food outside the box, it presses the bar, and then there was a flashing of light, and then the next step was it was given the food. It was given the food inside the box. So to make it more difficult, the rat can only receive food if it presses the bar more than once. First time it presses the bar once, then it presses the bar more than once, and there was a flashing of light, and then it got its food. So after initial confusion, it learned anyhow. It learned by practice, by doing it again and again and again. So by repetition, a lot of repeated exercise, it learned that after pressing the bar, then there will be a flashing of light, and then the food will be given to it inside the box. You can understand in this way. Here you can see stimulus, response, or reinforcement, repetition. Recall the experiment that we have discussed in our previous slide. What is stimulus according to this experiment? The food is the food is stimulus for a rat, for this rat. Stimulus on this base, it gave the responses. Press the bar. When it pressed the bar, the food was kept outside. So after watching the food, it became the stimulus. It felt hunger, or it wanted to eat something. So after seeing the food as a stimulus, it gave response. It gave response to pressing the bar. And when it gave response to pressing the bar, it was given reinforcement. It was given reward. It was given food, or tray of food inside the box. And again, it this exercise was doing again and again, repetitively. So it became a part of its behavior. Firstly, it did it unconsciously, undeliberately. Then after that, it was given again and again the responses. So again and again, it, did these actions deliberately, with consciously or deliberately, with full understanding that now it knew the process after pressing the bar, after watching the stimulus, after giving the response, it was given reward, or then this exercise was um, going on repeatedly. In Pavlov's studies, dogs learn that a stimulus, in this case a bell, when they were about to be fed, starting with two things that are naturally paired, salivation and being fed. If dog will give a salivation, the food will be given. So in the start, there was two stimulus, and then they paired or they associated another things, another component or third component by ringing a bell before feeding. With apart from salivation, after watching the food, apart from salivation, then there will be ringing a bell before feeding. After few trials, the dog learned to associate the bell with being fed and react by salivating at the sound of the bell and anticipation of their food, but without any food present. See in this diagram. In number one, you can see before conditioning. Before conditioning, there is a food, unconditional stimulus, there is a food, and the response, there is a salivation. And that salivation is unconditioned response, right? In the next stage, number two, before conditioning. It was also before conditioning, but now the association is going to perform. Association of the bell, right? Association of the bell and salivation. But at the start, will be no salivation with the bell because the salivation will be occur with the food, not with the bell. But now the trainer or the experimenter who perform the experiment, they want to teach in this way that the dog must learn that after hearing the bell, it will be given food. So here you can see no salivation, no conditional response, but neutral stimulus. Now in third stage, during conditioning, now it learned anyhow, it learned that the food, then there's a plus bell, then it gave response and salivation in the shape of salivation, unconditional response. And number four, after conditioning, after learning the whole behavior, after learning the whole activity, and it learned that ringing the bell without any food, there is no food. In the start, with the bell, there was no salivation. There was salivation with the food. Number two, there is no salivation with the bell. The third, food plus bell, ringing the bell, there is a salivation. So now in the fourth stage, the last stage, it learned anyhow without food, hearing the bell mean it will be given food very soon. So it became a conditioned response, conditioned stimulus or conditioned response without any stimulus of what we can say food. So in this way, the behavior became permanent. So since dog naturally becomes salivation when offered food, food is an unconditioned stimulus, as we all discussed in the previous slide. So unconditioned stimulus, unconditioned response. Then there was a conditioned stimulus. What was the condition? The hearing of the bell, or sorry, ringing the bell or hearing the bell. It became condition, and then there is a salivation of in the shape of conditioned response without watching or seeing the. What is classical conditioning? There we are discussing operant conditioning or classical conditioning. Classical conditioning, also known as Pavlovian or respondent conditioning, is the procedure of learning to associate an unconditioned stimulus that already brings about the involuntary responses, as we have seen in the dog's experiment. Unconditioned response or involuntary response with new stimulus so that this new stimulus can also bring about the same response. like in the shape of hearing the bell or ringing the bell. This was a new stimulus. So this new stimulus then becomes conditioned stimulus, and newly learned behavior is the conditioned response. So in the start, the hearing the bell, ringing the bell was not conditioned. It was unconditioned and there was no salivation. But then it became conditioned response because it threw salivation. Salivation was occurred as a result of this conditioned response. Here are some other examples, classical conditioning examples. Unconditioned stimulus, father slams the door, or father slams the door is yelling. It means when father will slam the door, shut the door forcefully, there will be scolding, there will be yelling, the father is very angry. In the start, the children will, or the child will learn just slamming the door, but then for one time or two times when father will perform this activity and slamming the door, then there was a yelling, or there was a shout, or there was a loud forceful talk by the father. Then mother brings home big shopping bag or new toys, right? Unconditioned stimulus. This is classical conditioning. Next, there is a neutral stimulus turned conditioned stimulus. Sound of door slamming, it became neutral. Now all the, what we can say, a child or children are learning this process. Father slamming the door, there is a yelling, there is a shout, and sight of big shopping bag, although there is nothing, a big shopping bag, hopefully something will be there for children. So at the sight of watching the shopping bag or big shopping bag, children became happy and they think that something is there. So this is the middle, or what we can say, neutral stimulus. Now what we can say, they are trying to understand the sight of big shopping bag or sound of door slamming, but still they didn't learn this activity, or they didn't learn this behavior very well. They are trying to learn. So number third is there, this third, conditioned responses or respondent behavior. Child trembles when father slams the door, the sound of the door, he hears the sound of the door, child trembles, or he got some sort of fear. Or after watching the big shopping bag, child is excited. Mother brought something for him. So that was a classical conditioning. What is operant conditioning? Operant conditioning, also known as instrumental conditioning, is the procedure of learning to increase or decrease a voluntary behavior using reinforcement or punishment. We also see that our children, sometimes, some of them, they are very good in their studies, and they bring their things, they bring their copy, they bring their writing, and they want to show us that they have done something very good. So we say very good, excellent. So although we didn't say them to perform excellent in their studies, they are doing this activity, or they are performing this responsibility by themselves, by self-responsibility base, or any other, by maybe as a result of competition with their peers. So when our children, they are performing very good in their studies, it means they are performing this operant conditioning. There's no enforcement, there's no forcement, or without forcement, with their free will, they are performing excellent in their studies. So it's called operant conditioning. Let's see the examples of operant conditioning. There are two examples. Parents, or mother or father, parent reads bedtime story, or reading story. It's a reinforcement. There is no stimulus in the start. It's a reinforcement. Reading story, giving treat by the trainer. This is reinforcement. Reinforcement by the trainer, reinforcement by the parents for their children, or for their trainee. So operant behavior, when after hearing the or listening the bedtime story, they go to bed on time by themselves, by their free will. After reading a story, it's a reinforcement. Or what we can see, they learn that it's very interesting. When they go to bed on time, they will begin a task. Next night, they will begin a task to hear or to listen to the bedtime story by their parents. Or when after reading performance, he or she will begin to feel by the change. So this is reinforcement or apparent behavior. And some other points that we can say regarding reinforcement. Positive reinforcement or negative reinforcement. Positive means there is a place for reward, and negative reinforcement, rebuke, punishment, or scolding. So positive reinforcement has positive effect, negative reinforcement has negative effect. If you want to change the behavior of a child, always give them positive response or positive reinforcement rather than negative ones, because but we can say, although we cannot deny the importance of negative reinforcements, but it depends upon the nature of the children. Different children have different nature. Sometimes positive reinforcements acts better than the negative reinforcement, and sometimes negative reinforcements also perform or gives good results. So it depends upon the nature of the children. Then there are several distinct differences between classical and operant conditioning. Classical conditionings involuntarily behavior with a stimulus, while operant conditioning associate voluntary or voluntary action with the consequence. Classical conditioning is passive because in this way a performer or doer of the action has not free will, or there is some sort of naturally occurring event or association of some other components. As a result, there is a change in the behavior occur. Whereas in operant conditioning, it's active, and the learner, the performer, doer of the action performs by himself or herself to get in for reinforcement or punishment, or by performing or by not performing the target behavior. Now move towards the mentalist theory. It was proposed by Noam Chomsky, and Noam Chomsky is, you must know, being a student of applied linguistics or linguistics. Noam Chomsky is an American linguist, philosopher, cognitive scientist, historian, social critic, political activist, and sometimes he is called the father of linguistics. He was born on 7 December 1928, and he is 90 plus, 92 years old, and he's very active, and he wrote many books. And he wrote a book in 1957. The name of the book was Syntactic Structure. He proposed a novel idea about human language. He said all human beings may be born with an innate understanding of how language works, and there is a language acquisition device in human mind, and it works as child start learning language. This device help him a lot, and he hears the word, he matches the word with that device, and in this way he goes on and he learns the language. In this way, with the passage of time, he becomes expert of that language. It's not related to behavior, it's not related to what we can say according to the behaviorist, it's not related to stimulus response based or stimulus reinforcement based. Chomsky stresses active contribution of the child and minimize the importance of imitation and reinforcement. Chomsky's in review of verbal behavior in his book in 1959, he criticized the behaviorist on the grounds that human mind is has the capacity of being novel, creative. So if we follow the principles of behaviorist or behaviorism theory, it means we are ignoring this novelty or creativity of the child in learning a language. Chomsky and Lindbergh claims and observations serve as framework of mentalist theory. And this mentalist theory, as we have discussed, presented by Noam Chomsky in 1959, Chomsky argued that the study of animal behavior in laboratory conditions show nothing about human beings learn language in natural conditions. So it's totally different to do experiment, to perform experiment in laboratory on animals. It's a different things. And human being learns language in a different way, in a natural setting rather than in a artificial setting or as a result of classical conditioning or operant conditioning. Chomsky and his mentalist followers claim that a child learns his first language through cognitive learning, through his mind. They claim that language is governed by rules and is not a haphazard thing. As Skinner and his followers would claim that if a child or if an animal perform this way, that he or that animal will be learned in that way. So it's not a haphazard way. It's not what we can say as organized system. It's an organized mechanism in the minds of a human being. And according to Chomsky, the child is born with the mental capacity for working on the underlying system to the jumble of sounds which he hears. He constructs his own grammar and imposes it on all the sound reaching his brain. So already there is a system, there is a mechanism in his mind, in the mind of human being. Whenever he hears, he match with that, and when matching occurs, he or she is able to use that word appropriately, accurately, according to the exposure. The picture is very old. Here, 86 years old. So now he is 92 years old. He was born as 7 December 1928. It's a Noam Chomsky. The mental grammar is part of his cognitive framework. It's related to cognition. It's related to mind and nothing. He hears a story in his brain until he has matched and against what he already knows and found a correct place for it with this framework, as we have already discussed this one. Chomsky argues that language is so complex. Sorry, language is very complex, and it cannot be learned by this repetitive exercises or in a short period of time. It takes so much time. So if there is no existence of this mental grammar or this layered system or this layered mechanism, human being has to take a lot of time to learn a language. So he says that a child is born with some innate mental capacity which helps child to process all the language which he hears. This is called the language acquisition device, as we have already discussed this one. So he saw it as comprising a special area of brain whose only function is the processing of language. When Chomsky talks about the rules, he means the unconscious rules in a child's mind. It doesn't mean that a child knows about all the rules and regulation, because when you have all, maybe you have this experience, a 3 years child or 4 years child, sometimes he intermingles the words, sometimes he uses wrong grammar, sometimes he uses such what we can say words that we amuse by hearing or the speech of the child, because sometimes it seems very stupid, and sometimes we amuse, we enjoy the child's speech. So these rules in everything to make women, because he was involved in the process to match, to find out the exact word according to the exposure, according to the what we can say a requirement. So sometimes he makes mistake to find out the exact word. So the rules are existed, but these rules are unconsciously. A child doesn't know about all those rules, that this one or this is the past tense, or this is the future tense, or this is the what we can say past perfect tense. He knows, he just uses that word with the exposure as a result of interaction with the adults or with other people, with peers, with friends, with siblings, or in this way, he again and again he uses those words, those rules, or those structure. Finally, he becomes expert in 6 or 7 months, 8 or 9 years old. You can see, you can speak, or you can say whatever you want to say in an accurate way. So, 3 4 years child is involved in this process to make matching, to find out the exact rules, to find out the exact structure. So that's why the that period is what we can say is associated with making mistakes. Chances does not mean that a child can do as described in the rules explicitly. It means the rules are not, he cannot, the child is unable to describe the rules, although he uses some rules, some grammar rules, some structural rules, but he is unable to describe those rules at that time, at that particular period of time when he or she is learning a language. For example, a 4 or 5 years old child can produce sentence like "I'm done with my work." He can do that because he has a mental grammar which enables him to form correct present perfect structure and also to use such structure in the right and appropriate situation. But he is unable to define the formation of present perfect. He uses "I'm done" or "I have done with my work." So he cannot describe that particular, the name of that particular tense which he is using in the statement part. Here is a comparison between behaviorist or mentalist approaches, or behaviorism theory or mentalism method. So when we do compare between two different things, we are able to get more understanding, more in-depth understanding, or in-depth insight about the phenomena that we are going to learn. So behaviorists, what behaviorists say? Language acquisition is stimulus response processes, as we have heard about all those experiments that we have Skinner or Alvin Pavlov. They perform experiment on rat, on dog. There is a stimulus, there is a response, there is a reinforcement, there is a response. So language is an innate inborn process. There is no need to show the stimulus to give the reinforcement. It's a, what we can say, byborn. It's byborn. The child has this capacity to use the language. Language is a conditioned behavior, conditioned with the stimulus, conditioned with the external motives, or conditioned with the any activity associated with the need. Language is not a behavior like other behaviors, but a specific mental process. It's a cognition process. It's a mind related or mind associated process rather than behavior. Children learn language by imitation and analogy. Analogy means the same things, and they say and they do the same things. Analogy, similar things. Children learn language by application, by using, by applying those grammar in actual situation. They learn language. Language learning is based on practice. Language learning is analytical, generative, or creativity based. So the role of the role of imitation, repetition, reinforcement, and motivation is very significant in language learning. The role of exposure to language is quite vital. Here, the role of exposure is very important. He has led the child, he has led language acquisition device in his mind, in his brain, and then he needs exposure to make the adjust to adjust in the fit environment and the fit exposure according to the needs, according to the demands. So, according to this rule, the last rule that we are discussing about, mentalist, if a child has no exposure, he or she is kept in a forlorn situation or condition. Where he or she doesn't have the chance to interact with other people. This language acquisition device will not work. So, exposure is very important. If there is no exposure, no learning of the language will be occur. Although, despite of the fact the human mind has a grammar mechanism already existed in it. So from birth to until the age of 4 years, a child is able to get mastery and command over the mother tongue. So if he is a Punjabi speaker, if she is a Punjabi speaker, he will be able to internalize this system and he will be able to get mastery over this language. Or if he's his or her L1 is English language or any other language or any language of the world, based on grammar fixing in their mind, a universal grammar. It's not related, this grammar is not related to English language, this grammar is not related to Urdu language, or this grammar is not related to particular Punjabi language or particular any provincial language. It is a universal grammar. And the words that are used by the child, it's according to the exposure, what she hears by the parents, by the siblings, by the exposure, by the adults, by the neighbors, by the teachers. So that words are internalized, but the language acquisition device assists him or her in this way to use the word appropriately, accurately, according to the situation. So this proves that a child's own rules of grammar are more important to him than mere imitation. So imitation is not so important. Having the rules or owning the rules of the grammar are more important as a child has in the shape of language acquisition device. So it's end of our lectures.